Very good. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's TNPS Zoom seminar. I think we're in for a real treat with Dr. Steve Murphree. And before we get started, just let me ask that everyone do a mute during the presentation. If you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat. We are going to reserve some time toward the end of the presentation to get to those. And obviously we can let it run beyond the usual hour if we need to. So again, welcome everyone, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest and our guest speaker tonight. So uh, Dr. Steve Murphy is a medical veterinarian, structural entomologist, and native of Bedford County, who's been a member of the biology faculty at Belmont since 1991. He holds a PhD in entomology from Auburn University and a bachelor's and master's degree in biology from Middle Tennessee State University. Dr. Murphree is a specialist in biting midges and maintains the international research website for these small flies. In addition to teaching courses such as parasitology and zoology, he is active in community service. He's a member of the Rutherford County Historical Society and a frequent contributor to articles about arthropods to the Tennessee Conservationist magazine. He's taught summer insect day camps for children since 1992 and has given programs to many school classrooms, scout groups, and nature centers. Dr. Murphree has served as a director of the Middle Tennessee Science and Engineering Fair since 2016 and has served as president of the Tennessee Entomological Society and the Tennessee Academy of Science. He received the Belmont Presidential Faculty Achievement Award and was named the Tennessee Environmental Education Association's Environmental Educator of the Year and the Tennessee Science Teachers Association Science Educator of the Year for Higher Education. He's been a member of the Sam Davis Memorial Association Board of Directors since 2014 and was elected president in 2016. A member of the Duck River Beekeepers Association, he maintains an apiary at the historic Sam Davis home and plantation. Steve and his wife Kay are parents of 4 adult children and live in Murfreesboro. With that, I will hand it over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Mitchell. I appreciate very much you pronounced zoology correctly. A lot of my students in my zoology class are still getting it wrong, but that's okay. I don't pick on them too much about that. Well, you all know that from the way Mitchell introduced me, that I'm more of a medical veterinary structural entomologist than I am a Gall entomologist, but it's certainly an interest of mine through the years, and I truly do enjoy learning more about them. I'll go ahead and share the first slide here, and hopefully this will work just about like, let's see, like it did before. Here we go. I'll have to. My computer will be a little bit slow coming up here, but I think it's already set to go to presenter mode. Well, I may stop that share and come right back to it then. Well, let's see. Let's try that one more time. That's more like it.
That's it.
You see it okay?
Yes.
I just need to see if I can get to the presenter mode part. Okay. Well, I think one of the reasons that I was asked to do this presentation has to do with this article that I wrote a few years ago for the Tennessee Conservationist. So, and I'm still trying to get my presenter view up like I had a while ago, Mitchell. You know, the best laid plans, you know that quote, right? But let's see here. Maybe this will work this way. That's it. Okay. All right. So this is an article. This gall on a maple leaf is called an oscillate gall, or a gall that's looking at you, basically. And of course, we naturalists and really people who aren't in nature much, when they are on a hike, they notice different things, but the human eye can catch a lot of things, can spot something that doesn't look right. And so that's a good example of something that you can see that's out there. And so plant galls are these abnormal growths. Some have likened them to tumors and warts on animals that have a causal agent, an external cause, and that can mostly be insects and mites, but sometimes it's a small nematode, it's a fungus, bacteria, even viruses can cause galls. One of my associates at Belmont used to do a lab where she would get students to infect plants with a virus to grow a gall, and then they would do a number of labs about that. So there's a variety of ways of looking at these. They can be very complex. Oftentimes by the shape of the gall and where it is on the plant, you can see and identify what species of insect or mite or whatever it is that's caused it, even if that insect is not there or that mite's not present. And I know a number of you have probably done some work with galls, and I don't know if you can see this in my image here or not, but I've got a pair of clippers here. Some of the galls are harder than others. They're covered with lignin, and so these are pretty handy. I'm thinking about opening a goldenrod ball gall with one of them, and if you try to use a pocket knife, you might cut yourself, right? But often we want to know what's inside. If there's anything inside a gall, and see if we can figure out what it is if you have a hand lens to take a look. Anyway, many different galls will produce nutritive tissues for the immature insect or mite that lives inside. The scientists who study galls still are uncertain how much it is controlled by chemicals produced by either the egg or the insect larva or the young mite, or the tissues or the hormones and such being produced by the plant as a response to that. And generally people, when they see galls on a plant, especially a tree or something like that, they're concerned about the health of the tree. Typically, most extension agent entomologists will try to calm their fears about it and say, you can pre-treat early in the spring if you want to. It's a big thing to do. It's usually best just to leave the trees alone, and the galls are not going to affect them that adversely. Well, there are a few exceptions to that. Also, galls will protect their inhabitants from potential parasites and predators, some of the time at least, as we'll see. All right, so there are people who study galls all over the world. There's a little journal. I noticed it's not in a later edition, than 2005, but they still have a website, the British Plant Gall Society. And cystology is the study of galls. That's just another name for galls. The gall fly family, the gall fly midges, are called Cystidomyidae. So they are named for the galls. There is a pretty good identification guide called Gall Formers that I may refer to at the end of the presentation, where you can type in information and possibly get good information, including distributions of the galls and the plants that are their host. Here's another book. I don't have this book yet, but it's called Insect Galls of Florida. That's available, of course, where you can get most every book these days on Amazon. One important point for both the scientist and the citizen scientist is that if you can identify the gall, I'll put it this way: the gall makers themselves, the gall inducers, are better taxonomists than we are. They can find the host plant and identify it as the correct one for them, whereas we scratch our heads sometimes with our keys to leaves and twigs and other plant parts and such. The gall formers can find them. All right, so I'll just show you the beginning of one research paper. Maybe you didn't know there's a journal called Biological Invasions. And of course, we think about some of the insect invaders like the gypsy moth, for example, and of course the spotted lanternfly. I could talk to you about that sometime too. But anyway, this is about non-native gall-inducing insects on woody plants, on forest trees. This is a review paper that was published just a few years ago. All right, you're going to have trouble seeing this unless you've got a big screen, but this is a nice graphic that shows many of the locations of plant galls. And I'm going to focus more on the galls that are above ground. I don't know the root galls that well, perhaps some of you do, but you'll see there are leaf blade galls, leaf petiole galls, there are stem galls, and there are bud galls, just to name a few. This next slide deals with what are called gills. This is from yet another published article. And so this is information about some of those. And remember, I said that not all insects and galls or mites are protected from predators and parasites. Some of them can get in there, and their larvae will either kill the larval gall-forming insect or co-inhabit with it for a while. There's really two groups of these, and some of these terms will be very, very familiar to some of you, and perhaps others not as much so, but we'll focus on a few of them here. The organisms that interact with galls and can interact secondarily with the inducer, those are the ones that interact directly with the inducer. So that's where we look into these inquilins, the cystophages. In other words, a cystophage is an insect that actually eats the gall tissue, sometimes from the outside in, or sometimes from the inside out. The next group we would look at would be the second group would be the predators, the parasitoids, symbionts, and kleptoparasites. So if we look at the predators, first of all, birds and various insects are predators. I'm very familiar with a couple of small birds that attack goldenrod ball galls and the fly larvae inside and get a winter snack that way. And one of them is the downy woodpecker, for example. And so then there are parasitic wasps, which we typically call parasitoids. They will go to a gall, and the female will lay an egg into the gall. The larva will then sometimes kill the gall-forming insect inside, or kind of take over, in other words, in place of it. And so that's what a parasitoid does. There are successors, and you see the term successors on the slide. These are ones that, for long-term galls that are there for longer than 1 year, one season, So even goldenrod ball galls, if they don't get bush hogged or whatever down, those galls can serve as a home for successing species like spiders, or even we found some ants in a ball gall the second year once that had been had the larva eaten by a downy woodpecker. So there was a convenient hole to go inside, and there was a little ant colony inside of it. So the term inquilin would be guests, or some might say unwelcome guests that get inside the gall, and so in other words, they can't make their own galls, but they feed off of gall tissues. Um, when the inquilins move in, they can basically, they sometimes kill the gall-inducing larvae inside, they sometimes don't. And of course, as I said before, the acidophages just eat gall tissues. You probably have heard of klepto before, like kleptomania, but the kleptoparasites are they steal things, right? They steal resources inside the gall from another organism, namely in this case, the gall-inducing insect. So kind of an ecological background, they call these gills. We see the word gills used elsewhere in ecology, like in stream ecology and places like that. All right, this is an example of a successor this is a spindle gall caused by a moth in goldenrod, and that's what the pupa would look like. But then this is a spider that was inhabiting that same gall. So it stayed there for the winter. All right, I'm going to briefly mention fungus-induced galls, and just a couple slides on those, and then we'll get into the plant galls that caused by insects and mites and such. The fungus-induced galls, I bet some of you have seen cedar apple rust, which of course occurs on two different trees. On eastern red cedar, which often has this gelatinous form here. You can see a couple different stages here, and then a hardened form later. But it also causes a leaf spot on your apple trees and sometimes on apple fruit. So this is the sort of thing, especially the extension entomology agents get a lot of questions about these, especially related to the apple part of the life cycle. These little fleshy projections, by the way, are called teleal horns. Another fungus, this is one that I actually saw one summer when we spent a night or two out at Pickett State Park and did some hiking. This is called eastern gall rust, and it's on an oak sapling. A very similar form of this can form on pine trees. It looks very similar, doesn't it? And it's usually on the woody stem or stalk or trunk, in this case, of a tree. It's I won't bore you with the scientific name. It's very long for this fungus that causes that. All right, let's get into some of the plant galls and look at the leaf galls first. A lot of you have seen leaves distorted or in folds and rolls, and I know as an entomologist, some of them are rolled over and they might have a spider underneath, or they might have a caterpillar if it's spice bush, for example, which is out right now in leafing out, it might have small caterpillars of the spice bush swallowtail underneath there if you open it up. But some, of course, have other things there that are usually made by gall-making midge flies, this big family called the Cicetomyiidae. And there's different scientific names for the ones that can cause this. There's also one that causes, if you know, black locust. It's very common in our area, the black locust gall midge, and this is what its larva looks like when you unroll the gall. So these are usually pretty easy to get into, aren't they? And take a look at with your magnifier. Okay, other galls are often very brightly colored, like these iridium patches. They're caused by mites for the most part. So you can see one example of those here. They're on red maple, sugar maple, silver maple. So they kind of, this is a light infestation of these here, and I think the next slide will show you a heavier infestation of these, and that can certainly impact the photosynthetic potential of those leaves on those trees. So this is a heavy infestation there. Okay, let's move on now to small pouches that you see. Sometimes we call these bladder galls, and this is on maple again, red maple, and they're hollow, purple green to red structures, and they sometimes can cause leaves to roll up or cup and drop prematurely. There is a single mite inside each gall, if you can find it. It's very small, that feeds and lays its eggs there. Some of you may have been seeing these. I'm sure some of you will probably have questions about other galls too that I don't have pictures of. Well, for those of you that are allergic to poison ivy, and that includes me now, I wasn't as a child. Maybe it makes you feel good to know that at least they have leaf galls too. And so these wart-like galls that you see here are made by a mite. Most of the mites that cause galls on leaves are in a big family called the Areophyidae. And then we can look at pouches, and this is something I'm sure you've all seen before on species of trees that we have here on elm in particular. I have some that grow along the edge of my backyard in forest, and they're just covered up with these every year. These pronounced pouches, and they're called elm sac galls. They're very host specific, and this one is actually produced by a non-native aphid, and I said it was a mite, but it's probably an aphid that causes this, that was introduced into the United States in the 1890s. So I guess the question is, when do you call something that was non-native introduced, when do you say it's a part of our fauna now, right? But that's a whole nother question there. All right. Here is an earlier stage in that, and you can see some of the small aphids inside of it, that the one that causes elm sac gall. Okay, sumac. We're all familiar with this woody shrub. I guess I'll call it that. Maybe you've got a different name, but these are bladder-like galls, and it's an aphid, another aphid that produces this. These can change color as many galls do over time in a growing season. Continuing with leaf galls, these are finger-like galls, and we often see these sticking up on black cherry. I know that's where I often see them. These are microscopic mites. If you were to cut one of these open and you had enough magnification, you might be able to spot one of the mites inside. Areophyid mites. These are globular or conical galls. Often there's a slit on the underside of the leaf. So these are caused by small insects called phylloxera. They're a type of midge, these gall midges, and they're normally, you see them on a lot of hickories. And I read somewhere that there are 44 different phylloxera galls, and then there are 62 different cecidomyid or midge gall species that are known to make galls on hickory. So this one, I think, I'm not sure about this one, whether it's a phylloxeran, I believe it is, which is a sucking insect. And then, of course, the midges are tiny little flies. And I'll show you a picture of what an adult gall midge looks like later. They have really long legs and they're very small. Okay, back to the oscillate leaf gall. It's a gall midge fly called Asterocesis ocellaris. This spot will eventually turn brown with time. Likely your eye has been drawn to these eye-shaped galls. on maple at times in the past. This is a blister gall, also on hackberry. It's caused by an insect called a psyllid. That's P-S-Y-L-L-I-D. It's an aphid-like insect that sucks fluids from plants, and this is what the adult looks like here. It looks kind of cicada-like, only much smaller, and that is what would emerge after the immature stages have developed in those blister galls on hackberry. All right, we move now to vein swellings on plants. Sometimes they're very brightly colored, like this one called gouty, the gouty vein midge. Gouty, if you know what gout is, a human condition where you get swellings, right, around your ankles or wherever. Plants have gout too, don't they? They have gouty galls caused by, in this case, a midge on the underside of maple leaves. And so the midge larva of the species that does this in the genus Daisonura injects a stimulant while feeding, leading to the swelling and change in color from light green to red. And this can cause the leaf to curl, as this one already is curled a little bit. So it reduces photosynthesis. Okay, let's look at detachable galls. So these are galls that you could take your fingernail and probably break off. They have a little appendage underneath, and then open up that gall if you wanted to. This is another midge fly, a Cicetomyid, in a different genus and species, the oak leaf gall midge. And probably you've seen some of these. We find them when I'm walking around with the children in my summer bug camps at Belmont. I know exactly the tree to look for to find them on the south end of our campus. Okay, and then we have bullet galls. Does that look like a bullet to you? Maybe. Maybe you could convince yourself that it does. Another gall midge species causes this on hickories. So the larva would be inside there if you opened it at the right time. That would eventually pupate and become the adult gall midge fly. These are called nipple maker galls. They look a little different, and those sometimes are fairly detachable. They almost look like they're rooted into the surface of the leaf, the undersurface of the leaf in this case. So they're what we call hackberry psyllids, and this is a pretty common gall. I've seen these a long time, and I've cut these open in the laboratory to show children in the bug camps at Belmont to see the little immature psyllid inside, and they stimulate the growth as they live and feed inside, and give some pretty good protection as they do too. Sometimes the leaves will drop though if they get too many of these on them, and this is what it looks like inside, and that's what the adult looks like. The hackberry nipple maker gall, if you cut it open just right, you'll see the little nymph inside before it becomes the adult. Okay, here's another one that I saw at Pickett State Park, and I felt sorry for this poor little oak seedling here because it had two of these massive oak leaf galls, and these things can get to be 2 inches wide, up to 5 centimeters. They're caused not by midge flies, but by gall wasp in the family Cynipidae. That's a big family of gall midges, gall flies, not flies, gall wasp. They are true wasps, and they're usually very small and stocky. Here's what one of them looks like. There are some that are fleshy and some that are said to be hollow. And this is kind of neat because you can see the spindles right in the center. You can see the larva of that gall wasp if you cut one of those open. But these are really big galls that get noticed pretty easily on oak leaves themselves. And there's another gall or two big galls of oaks on stems that we'll get to pretty soon. Okay, petioles. Petiole swellings. This is an example of a walnut petiole gall. How do you determine, are you looking, if people are not as good as most of you all with tree identification. How do you determine if it's black walnut or that dreaded tree of heaven? Well, if it's got walnut petiole galls on it, it's walnut. And these don't grow on tree of heaven, Helianthus. So they're often very hairy or furry looking. They have eriophyid mites inside of them. If you open one up at the right time, you'll find the tiny mite inside. So petiole swellings. Here is probably the most common of all galls I'll show you. I'm sure you've seen this one before too. We looked at the hackberry nipple makers, but this is a petiole gall that I bet you've seen before of hackberry. And these are hardened when they're finished, and you might need the clippers to cut those open with to look inside. It's made by another sucking insect like an aphid. They're called psyllids. Again, P-S-Y-L-L-I-D, psyllids. And this is what they look like on the inside. So it's a little yellow nymph of that psyllid that you can see right there. Okay, and this is what an adult looks like, an adult of that psyllid. That, again, they look kind of cicada-like, but they're very small. If you were to see one, there's another group of insects that resemble them on tree trunks too, but they're in another family, another group altogether. So that's the one that causes the hackberry petiole gall, a very common gall. All right, there are swollen buds. This is jewelweed. You'll be very familiar with that native plant, and the bud is not going to turn into what it's supposed to. It's swollen. It's got a fly larva inside. This is a gall fly called Schizomya impatentis. Okay, and it's impatient about something. I'm not sure what, but it's in the big family of flies called Cystidomyidae, again, the gall midge family, just a different genus from most. And so the larva is often bright orange. Okay, what about something that looks on the bud of a plant like this? You can see this thing that looks a lot like a pine cone. What's it doing on willow, you might ask, if you see it? This is caused by a gall midge, again, in that big family, Cystidomyidae, and this one's called Rhabdophagia strobiloides. And if you look inside of this one, cut it lengthwise, you'll see the larva of that midge, that fly. Again, it's a little orange larva right inside of that thing, but it looks for all the world like a pine cone. So that's a dense growth that you can see. And I think the next one I've got coming up here, we're moving over to what we call detachable stem and twig galls. And this is one I see a lot when I go out looking for goldenrod with my students, old blackberry from the previous year, and you can see the big prominent swelling along the stems of those. So that is the blackberry knot gall. It's actually a colonial gall, so there will be a number of the little wasps that will emerge from this one. If you find one at the right stage, there will be all these exit holes where the wasp have left it. These are the larvae inside of it that you can see there. Okay, this is probably the prettiest gall that I'll show you. I really like this one. Maybe a few of you have seen this one before. It's called the wool sower gall, and you'll see it on the twigs of white oak. And this is what the little tiny cynipid wasp looks like that causes it. They look a little, people say they look like toasted marshmallows. And it's a group of small hairy galls that are all together. So it's a colonial gall, and a number of these adult wasps that have that sort of a truncated rear end or abdomen will emerge from one of these. So it's considered a petiole swelling or right at the stem. And here, if you tear one of them open, you'll see some things that look like seeds, but they're not really seeds. That's where the gall wasp is, the larva is feeding. The little grubs or the larvae are inside of those yellow seed-like structures. Okay, this is a really large gall, and I have a friend who's been in Memphis recently, and she put on Facebook that Memphis has been having a big problem with horned oak twig galls. And I think the one that she had photographed were some that had fallen to the ground. They are detachable, so they will break off. I've seen big galls like this before. There's also one called a smooth one called a gouty oak gall. I'm trying to remember where I was. I might have been at Land Between the Lakes at the Brandon Springs Conference Center there. Some of you may have visited there once, and there was an oak tree back behind that building that was just covered up with these big stem or twig galls. So this is the horned oak gall. Here's what the little adult wasp would look like. These begin to project. The little horns are there for a long time. These things can be 2 inches in diameters. They live on the tree for 2 years, 24 months. In the second year is when the horns come out of them, and they serve as escape tunnels for the adult wasp as they leave. So this is a very long-lived gall, isn't it? It takes 33 months from egg to hatch as an adult. So these things, if you get enough of them on the branches or the twigs or of an oak tree, they can cause the branches to droop down quite a bit. There are both detachable forms like this and some that are non-detachable that won't fall to the ground later. This is what we call a terminal twig swelling. And by the way, I should have mentioned at the beginning of the talk that there's a lot of different ways you can present about galls, but I went with the framework in a book called Tracks and Signs of Insects and Other Invertebrates by Eisman and Charney. And I'll show you a picture of that, the cover of that book coming up. Anyway, this is a beaded willow gall. It is a spindle-shaped gall, and it's at the end of a twig. So this is the very tip of it up here. It has a gall midge that causes it. So again, a big family, Cicetomyidae. And then this, going back to the goldenrod old field setting again, these, I'm going to classify these as terminal also, although this is a herbaceous plant, not a woody plant, clearly. But you've seen these rosette galls or bunch galls, little midge fly, same family again. Cicetomyidae makes these. It stops the apical growth. Oftentimes you'll see lateral growth that comes out above, so the goldenrod does get to flower a little bit. These older galls like this in the winter serve as microhabitats for other insects. So little spiders will get in there and hang out, kind of like they did in that spindle gall example I told you as a successor. And for this reason, we call them ecosystem engineers. And so on a much larger scale, beavers have been called ecosystem engineers because of what they do to water flow of streams when they build their dens and how that affects the habitat for other species. Okay, and this is finally, you get to see what an adult gall midgefly looks like. They're just all legs, aren't they? They have very long antennae. That tells me what subgroup of the order Diptera they're in. It makes them a little closer to the biting midges that I study, but that's a whole different family. So this is what an adult bunch gall or rosette gall fly looks like. All right, and then there are the ball galls. So these are stem swellings in herbaceous plants. This is what these look like in the summertime. They're harder to see. And this is what they look like in the wintertime. Sometimes they're double galls. As such, these are attractive to small birds like the downy woodpecker and the black-cap or Carolina chickadee, and they will get a little winter snack out of those if they can get to the larva inside. The woodpeckers make it easy because they can, what the gallfly larva does, one of the last things it does before it pupates is it tunnels out to just underneath the surface of that ball gall and makes a paper thin little area out there. So the downy woodpecker can find that, can poke right through it with its beak, stick its thorny tongue down there and get that larva in no time at all. The poor little chickadees, they just hack and hack at them and finally get to the larvae, but they probably use more energy getting to the larvae than they would get from eating the larvae itself. Anyway, that's what the ball galls look like. I'm sure you've seen them. And this is what the adult ball gall fly looks like. It's about the size of a housefly. It has mottled wings. If you collect some of these in the early winter, you will get flies to emerge. They usually emerge in nature about mid-March into April. All right, another herbaceous stem gall that I mentioned briefly before is the goldenrod gall moth. And there's its scientific name. This is what it looks like when goldenrod is still alive in the summer and early fall. These are spindle galls, and at the very top is a beveled edge. It's really easy to see that. And again, I remember I said someone else who was very observant had found that inside of one of these was a spider that had decided to spend the winter there until it was interrupted by the gall observer. Okay, this is a woody stem that has a spindle gall to it. This is a sawfly. I haven't said anything about sawflies yet. Mostly we think about sawfly larvae that look like caterpillars that can defoliate plants, usually evergreens that we have in landscapes and such. But this is the sawfly, and this is what the sawfly larva looks like here. They do look caterpillar-like, don't they? There are ways to tell the difference. And then this is what the sawfly adult looks like. So they are Hymenoptera. They're in with the wasp and the ants and such, and bees. But this is what a sawfly adult looks like. The one that causes this stem gall on the woody stems of willow. Okay, a couple of others here. My father has a big bald cypress tree that's still walled, but it's just about to put on its vegetation for this year. And sometimes I'll see this gall, the cypress flower gall. It looks like a flower, but it's not on bald cypress. It's caused by yet another gall midge and yet another genus with a really long scientific name that I won't try to butcher up and pronounce for you. Some of you probably have seen this before. And so just to move to some of the gall resources here that we could look at, there is, if you go to gallformers.org, you'll see that this is for plants where you can identify galls and learn about the host plants of them in the United States and Canada. So North America, there are search filters for location, like where you see it on the plant. Whether they are detachable or not, whether they'll break off or have fallen off on the ground, the geographic location or place where you've observed the gall, and then if you know the gall family of the gall inducer, what species, say it's a gall midgefly or a gall wasp that causes it, you can put that family in and do a search. And it gives a lot of good information. It usually produces a map that shows how well distributed it is in North America. So it's a pretty good resource that I've recently come across. And then here's the book that I used their pattern of, their little chapter on galls, to go through the different categories that they organized, showing some of their examples. Some of you may know this name, Noah Charney. He is a Nashville native. I think he went to the University School of Nashville before he went to up in the Northeast somewhere. I forget, maybe it's University of Connecticut. And his co-author is that Charlie Eisman, who is maybe it's Massachusetts. Anyway, but I'm trying to think about, maybe it's UMass where he went to school. But you may also know Noah Charney because he has been active in this campaign, I'll call it, called Radnor to the River. Does that sound familiar to you? Some of you it might. They're wanting to establish trails all the way from Radnor Lake State Park all the way over to the Cumberland River. And so that's something that's underway. and they're making some progress there very gradually in that process. The other is a book that I mentioned that I'd like to get a copy of. I haven't yet, by a lady named Amanda Hodges. I believe she's an extension entomologist at the University of Florida, Gainesville, and it's insect galls of Florida. So they'll have a few galls that we don't have here because part of Florida, of course, is subtropical in their climate, but some of them will be very similar to our own. Okay, and then for those of you that may be interested and want to have a copy of this presentation, I'm glad to send it to you. It's probably too large to send just as an email attachment, but I can certainly do it another way very easily. But this is a nice little presentation by a lady to a society. It's a presentation much like I just gave to you, that has good information. You can see some big oak apple galls right here on this very first image. And these, of course, the leaf galls of different sizes. And so I would recommend that to you. It's like 45 minutes long, so I'm certainly not going to start it now and take the rest of that time doing that. So Mitchell, I think this is probably the last slide I had before we might go into some more information on goldenrod.
Well, before we leave that last slide, if you would like to send me that presentation, we will make it available to those who would like to have it.
Okay, I will do that to you. There's a real easy way to do it. I've managed to convince Louise Zepp at the Tennessee Conservationist the easiest way to send files that have a lot of memory to them, a lot of size, is through a service on the internet. So I'm trying to think about what it's called right now. I'm having a senior moment, Mitchell, but it'll come to me.
We'll work it out, but if you can make a link available to me, I can download it too. So whatever works best for you.
That's how it'll be easy for you to download, and then you can make that available to members who have an interest in having this. And it's really better if you get the PowerPoint. I could make a PDF out of it that I could email, but I had some of my slides kind of layered with pictures of what the gall looks like, what the larva, what the adult looks like. That wouldn't come across well on PDF. So anyway, if there's some questions on the chat, we can go to those, however you want to handle it.
Right now, I think you're good. So why don't you go ahead and give us some of the additional material that you have?
All right, let's do that. By the way, there's a really neat video. You'll probably see a link to it coming up here. A hotbed center for goldenrod gall research, especially the ball galls, is up in New York State. You'll see more about it in a minute. A professor named Warren Abrahamson, and there is a streaming video called "The Goldenrod and the Gallfly." So this, of course, is what we see goldenrod looking like in late summer. This does not cause allergies like ragweed, of course. And I don't think I have any notes on these slides, so I'm just going to go on through them. But this is what we see goldenrod looking like in the wintertime. Those yellow flowers are no more. But we could, if we start, it's a lot easier to see the galls in the wintertime. So this is an artist did a really good job of illustrating the three types of galls that we see there. We can see the goldenrod ball galls here. And of course, there's different species of goldenrod. And someone once told me that all the ones at Bells Bend Park where my students go are all Canadian goldenrod, but I'm not so sure of that myself. There may be some other species there like tall goldenrod. I'd like to know more about that. Anyways, you can see the artist's drawing of what the goldenrod gallfly looks like. That's called Eurosta solidaginus. And then this is the bunch gall. If you break off all the dead leaves that serve as microhabitats, as I mentioned, you'll see a tiny little gall at the end of that, sort of a terminal herbaceous gall, and that's what the adult fly looks like. By the time you see it in the winter, the flies are long gone. The only galls you'll see in a goldenrod field that might have anything alive in them are the ball galls. And sometimes what's alive in them are not the larvae of Eurosta solidaginus, the ball gall fly. Sometimes they're the larvae of a little inquilin beetle called a tumbling flower beetle that are very distinctive when you see them inside the gall. They have probably eaten the gallfly larva to mature inside of those things. Well, then here's the spindle gall and what it looks like with its beveled edge hole on the upper region of it here. And that's what the tiny moth looks like when it emerges. And again, it's long gone by the time my students and I are there in January and February looking at them. Okay, so again, you can see there's a lot of what we, in the study of evolution, we talk about various types of natural selection. And this is a good example of what I call stabilizing natural selection, because in the summertime, when these ball galls are there are parasitic wasps, at least 2 species of them. The females will shoot their eggs in there. The larvae will consume the developing larvae inside of the gall and finish their life cycle. They will later emerge out of a small hole. So we find these in the winter with a small hole. We know that that larva got killed long ago by the larva of a parasitoid wasp like that. Of course, the bigger the gall is, well, if it's a skinny gall, not as many wasps are going to find it. But if it's a big gall in the wintertime, like these up here, that were taken, I took that picture in one of my father's old fields in Bedford County. Then these birds, like the downy woodpecker and the chickadee, whichever species, are going to find them because they're bigger. So the stabilizing natural selection would select for an intermediate size gall, for the ball gall larva to make it all the way through to an adult fly. If there weren't many parasitoid wasps, it would probably be a bigger gall. If there weren't as many birds, it'd be a smaller gall. You see, it just depends. And of course, there's magazines, bird watching magazines have even featured what the downy woodpecker does. That's a female downy there. And this is what their damage looks like. It's really easy to see in the wintertime. As I said, the chickadees just hack these things to pieces to try to get in there. That's what it looks like when a chickadee gets done. And so there's some research on this, that can plants truly have behavior? Well, maybe they do. Young goldenrods that are at a stage when I couldn't identify them along about now in the spring have a ducking behavior response. Some of them do, so that they nod over, and it's harder for the gallfly females to find the proper node area on the stem to lay eggs. And so perhaps this helps them to avoid attack, if you want to call it that, by the female Eurosta fly. So this came from American Journal of Botany not that many years ago. So we call these candy cane stems. And this is the goldenrod and the gallfly video, that if you get a copy of this does work. It doesn't go immediately to the video, but you can scroll down and get there. And this is a presentation that's still up on the internet. This is when it was trendy for my students to use this presentation software called Prezi. Maybe some of you have heard of Prezi, Prezi. And it kind of makes you dizzy when you click on it, but it's a very good presentation anyway, if you want to go to that. But again, this is a really good one just on ball galls at Bucknell University, which I believe is it's either Pennsylvania or New York State. Somebody will know, and you can unmute and say if you want to. I should know that, but I can't recall for sure. Okay, if you open up a goldenrod ball gall, you have to be careful how you open it up. You'd have to use the clippers, and you open it just right. You can see where the exit tunnel is that each larva makes before it gets ready to pupate later. Right here's where the downy woodpecker gets its beak in. This is what it looks like when you open it up and see the larva. They're very globular. And I thought it was neat. Some of you will know who Anna Botsford Comstock was. She was the wife of a little more famous Henry Comstock, who did a lot of textbooks on early entomology from Cornell University. But I really liked the way that she called this. She said, a gall dweller like this is a boy living in the middle of a giant sponge cake, who when hungry would naturally eat out a larger cave in the heart of that cake. These actually, I think if you're a bluegill fisherman, you'd have to do a lot of these things to get enough bait. But I've heard that people will cut these open in the wintertime and get the larva out, or maybe in the late fall, and put them on your hook. And apparently the other panfish like bluegill and seed crackers and all that, they can't resist them. And again, here is altissima, here's gigantea, two different species of this. And the female flies, here's one using her ovipositor, will lay up to 25 eggs, roughly in the same general area. She won't fly very far after she's mating. And sometimes there are these double stems like this. She didn't move very far at all there, did she? Back in the early spring or mid-spring. These are some of the parasitoids, and you can see what the larvae look like if you were to find them inside of a gall uretoma. Here's the tumbling flower beetle I mentioned, Mordellistina, that has the larvae very distinctive with ridges like this. And here's yet another uretoma wasp that is a parasitoid. So those gall larvae are somewhat safe, but they're not completely safe from these parasitoids. And again, the Mordellistina would not be a parasitoid, it'd be more of a inquilin, as I defined that early on in the talk. And then the vertebrate predators, we looked at those a while ago. So that can account for up to 60% of the gall midge mortality. So they make it that long, and then they become a winter snack for a little bird. We find that those little birds don't fly very far from tree lines, though, because there are sparrowhawks out there in the open fields and other small, like Cooper's hawks, that will grab them just as easily for their own prey. So this is what Mordellistina looks like, the little inquilin inside of a ball gall that's been opened. If you see a lot of this material in here, that's called frass, or insect fecal material. Frass is one of the favorite terms that the kids learn in my bug camp. They like that a lot for some reason, but when I teach them about that. These are the rosette galls. We looked at those before. Again, the ecosystem engineers that you can find. There's usually a lot of these. These sometimes outnumber the ball galls if you look at a patch of goldenrod. Of course, goldenrod, perennial plant, big patches of them out there in open fields. And you open up the goldenrod spindle gall, and you'll see this is where an adult has emerged, and that's the pupal case that it's left behind. And more of that, that's what the adult looks like. That's what the larva looks like inside, and the pupa.
So Steve, are most of these galls that you're showing us, the ball galls, spindle galls, one season to produce the size and shape that you're showing, or
Yes.
go through multiple seasons?
It takes just one season. You know, we did talk about some other galls like those oak twig galls, like that horned one that it's there for 2 years at least, maybe longer, 33 months I think it was before the adults come out. These are all in 1 year, and I should mention too, we were talking about the feeding by the birds here. This is a learned behavior, by the way. Of course, the downy woodpeckers and the chickadees hopefully live more than 1 year as adults, and they watch other birds, and that's how they learn how to do it. And then they pass, others learn it. It's a learned behavior, just a simple learned behavior out there in the goldenrod patch. And again, the beveled edge, I showed you that before. This is in the winter to the right. This would be in the summer or fall when there's probably still a larva in there.
Well, Steve, I think you've given us an awful lot of material here to digest.
Yeah.
Been very interesting. I think we just about reached the time limit here, but
Okay.
are there any questions from anyone else in the audience that you would like to pose before we close tonight? Yes, Karen.
How do bagworms fit into this scenario? They're not
Right, right. Bagworms are moth larvae that usually get on I want to say arborvitae and other evergreens like that. The bag has a female inside the larva. Well, it's not really a caterpillar. Well, it is. It is. It's a moth caterpillar that does pupate inside that, and then the adult moth is there. The adult males emerge and find them there and mate with them. But it looks kind of like a gall, but it's silky. You can tear it apart and look inside it. I've done that a number of times to some that we have on the Belmont campus. So I'm sure there's others that have seen other galls that I didn't feature tonight, that you may have stories about or whatever. There's so many of them out there, and just it's really impressive how many species, mostly of tiny gall midgeflies and tiny gall wasp, are actually found out there in the natural environment in just the state of Tennessee.
So the comments we've received, I think when you showed the gall on the poison ivy, someone was very happy about that and said, yay.
Yeah, I was happy to find that one too.
Number of thank yous here. Thank yous from different people, certainly. And let's see, I think there is one here from Sandra. Would appreciate contacting, or maybe I'm off a little bit too far off here. Sorry. Um, but anyway, I do appreciate again all the information you shared with us, and I certainly learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else did as well. And if there are no other questions, then we're going to close for tonight. Thank you so much, Steve, for doing this and for sharing all your wisdom and knowledge with us.
Well, I'm glad to participate. Again, it was very much a learning experience for me, because I'm really not a gall expert, but I really enjoy studying them and learning more about them.
Sounds good. Well, I want to say good night to everyone. I hope you have a good evening and a good day tomorrow. Thank you so much.